Xiaodi, it's great to have you back. Last time you were on, we talked about the incredible ride that I had in the autonomous truck. We went over an hour and a half, not one intervention, surface streets, highways, and boy, oh boy, how that truck went around that bridge. Amazing. No interventions. Today, you're here for a little something a little bit different. You're an extremely smart, talented individual, and it's not just me saying this, sir. You've earned a PhD in Computation and Neural Systems from California Institute of Technology. You're qualified to answer this. What are your thoughts on DeepSeek?
Hey, Grayson. Great to be here again. And yeah, this is definitely a hot topic for this week's. I think DeepSeek is, on one hand, not a scientific breakthrough, but an engineering breakthrough. And that engineering breakthrough really is a wake-up call for a lot of people.
Why is it an engineering breakthrough and not a scientific breakthrough?
A lot of the big and small tricks that you see in DeepSeek models are actually not that novel in terms of the scientific perspective. Like, you can't write a paper out of many of the tricks that they wrote, like how they optimize the GPU usage, how they accelerate things. They're, good to have tricks, but not really fundamentally changing the landscape of the science of LLM. That's what I mean by they're not science, but they're engineering. The power of engineering is that they are aggregated in such a beautiful, coherent way, such that every effort that you can see in their innovation are based on one thing, that is how to do this LLM efficiently and in a low-cost fashion.
How do you think they did it?
I probably am going to get something very abstract. I think this is really because of they have a very good organization. And in the organization, everyone is aligned with the same guiding principle that there is not enough resources on GPU, and they accepted that fact. And based on that condition, they started to defy the traditional rule of you gotta have a lot of GPUs, you gotta do a lot of huge computing. You have to follow the scaling law, scaling law, and you also have to do things as other people has predicted. But they defy almost all of those conditions, with the only thing that they wanted to lower the computing cost, they wanted to lower the training cost, inference cost. They just try to see how far they can go. And in fact, they got amazing results. This is a really good spirit. I like that.
Will efficiency be the name of the game going forward? Will there be a global reorganization around efficiency? And I say that because DeepSeek did publish the paper.
Yes, I think that's also because they believe their competitiveness is going beyond the paper. So that's why they can publish the paper.
Well, with the weights, and now Dell's integrated it, Perplexity's integrated it, Grok with a Q has integrated it. So you're seeing various integrations on the model. Does that become where this model will continue to evolve and get integrated into third-party locally hosted?
I definitely see that trend. You know what? Last night, I actually played it with my own computer, gaming computer. I have a 4090 for gaming purpose primarily in the past. But yesterday I was thinking, okay, maybe I should try it. And I actually installed Olama and basically set everything up in my home environment. So I think this trend is going to continue, that a lot of places were previously considered not suitable for this LLM hosting will become available for hosting the LLMs.
And what impact does that have on the development of autonomous driving?
I think the direct development impact will be really minimum because we're not dealing with the core problem of LLM where, historical information or medical information is not going to really to help you on how to drive the vehicle, right? But on the other hand, I think the paradigm shift is something that is very obvious and very, very impactful in people's thinking, especially for the investors. I think that is really going to change the landscape in near future, and we can see that happen.
Could the DeepSeek R1 model be modified or built upon to enhance autonomous driving from an energy efficiency perspective?
I would say let's take a step back. If you're thinking about that, then you're still thinking in a more scientific way of doing things. What I'm trying to say is that this is an engineering achievement, not a science achievement. Thinking about this as iPhone, maybe put this way. Let's use iPhone as an example. iPhone, I would say it's a product and engineering achievement. It's not a science achievement because every technology or every gadget used in iPhone crammed in this iPhone device, has been developed years ago. What Apple did great was really putting things in one device and make them work. If you're on the other hand looking for scientific discoveries or scientific breakthrough, thinking about atomic bomb, nobody has built that bomb before. Nobody even know how to detonate the bomb, but they have made it. So this is the difference. And I would say that for autonomous driving, we are always facing a large number of small problems. And we should not look for a small number of silver bullets to solve those problems. Instead, what we should see is like the methodology, the Tao behind problem solving. That has to be a very consistent, a very self-contained, a very coherent principle. And these principles are not easily transferred from like one product, say DeepSeek, to what Bot Auto has been built.
Are there inspirations from an engineering perspective that can be taken from that?
Definitely. I think the biggest inspiration is we should have the courage, which we already have, to defy the traditional, I would call it asymptotic trajectory of how things should be developed. Because if you look at in many domains, especially for the LLM domain, people believed too much in this scaling law, believing that, okay, next year I'm going to double my computing capability. By doing that, I will have 1% of the model performance gain. This is really happening in a lot of industries by believing in this asymptotic growth. On one hand, you are suffering from ever increasing amount of resource requirements. On the other hand, you are actually blessed with a more certain development gain as you go on that path. In the early days, definitely this path can show a lot of progress, especially in the scientific phase of things. Like early days of LLM, people don't even fathom how great it can be, right? That is a moment where you can dump more resources into it. However, at some point when people started to gather enough information about the model and the competition starts to happen, and I would say some people still rely on this very predictable trajectory of future growth. And if the majority of the people are based on that assumption and are relying on scaling law to grow their model and try to be at the next milestone for the next year, and then now you come with a rule breaker, that's DeepSeek. They try to do something, optimizing their system in a very different fashion, like also the fine tuning. They are basically removing the supervised fine tuning for the experimental project called DeepSeek's Zero. That is another thing. Like they're not only removing the computing burden for the future, but they're also removing the data burden. Even though it's a very hypothetical experiment, but I think the DeepSeek R1 is a hybrid model. Sometimes they rely on the DeepSeek Zero, where they do not have the supervised fine-tuning SFT data for training. Sometimes they use some of the data, but that's a hybrid model is R1, which gives you a very distinct way of doing reasoning on the chain of thought. So that is also very, very novel. And this novelty adding up together is actually their desire or their effort to try to minimize the amount of resources that need to rely on to improve their systems.
Do you agree with Mark Andreessen's recent statement that DeepSeek is a Sputnik moment?
Yes, I do. Because you see, after DeepSeek, people started to realize, do I still spend money on a very certain growth like we do in a way that, you put it this way, I think it reminds me about Kung Fu Panda, right? Your father's father make noodles and your father make noodles, so you should make noodles. And I think people are sometimes following this like a noodle making trajectory because it really gives you the return, the promised return. But the curse of the exact path is that this promised return will diminish over time. And in the early days, there's no reason not to put enough resources in that. But I think the DeepSeek moment is really the Sputnik moment, telling people, hey, now we are in a more matured industry of LLM. We should think about things outside the box.
Traditionally, this is pre-DeepSeek. How much resources were needed to build an autonomous driving model traditionally?
Oh, wow. Then you're talking about different generations. First of all, there is I would say before deep learning, building autonomous driving is extremely difficult because you need to hire a lot of PhDs in building each component of it. And I know some people have been doing that before the deep learning era. Yeah, but gladly, I'm young enough. So when I do my startup, deep learning has already been invented. That makes my life 100 times easier. But still, I'm still old enough so that I was riding on the last wave of deep learning, where a lot of tasks are actually separated. You have one deep learning neural network for detecting objects, another detecting objects using camera. You have another completely different neural network for deciphering the LiDAR point cloud, and yet another neural network for predicting the behaviors of the vehicles. So you can imagine that you have a lot of small deep learning neural networks glued together, but they're trained separately, they are maintained separately, and they're running, inferring separately. And that was the last generation deep learning. And by doing that, you don't need a lot of resources to make each of these neural networks activated and up and running. But now the time has changed to the next phase, which is like people have realized that multitask learning is the true answer for a lot of the questions. So there's a new tendency, especially I would say inspired by this ChatGPT. There is a ChatGPT moment for the world, of course. After the ChatGPT moment, I think more people, including us, because we are fortunate enough that Bot Auto is still a young company, that we have absorbed all of these new insights into it. One is a transformer that basically gives you the flexibility of incorporating all different modalities into one neural network. And then the other is multitask. People realize adding more tasks into the same system can actually boost each other's performance. All of these new insights are actually putting together, allowing people to build one big neural network to solve the problem. But even with that, traditionally, the consensus in the industry is that unlike the large language model, which requires, for example, your history information, the legal basis, or sorry, the legal corpus and the history corpus and the medical corpus and the literature, everything of the mankind history, putting in one neural network. That is a gigantic neural network. But unlike from that, if you're building something only for the vision tasks, for recognizing objects in the world, for understanding their interactions, the amount of parameters you need for building this network is actually much smaller than the large language neural network. So we basically, I mean, every company has their own jargon. I personally prefer to use foundation model to describe one neural network that serves all of the different tasks and aggregate a broad enough but not too broad information. We don't need to use our foundation model used for driving in Bot Auto to detect any kind of tumors in medical images, right? That is what I mean by large enough periphery, but still within the context of autonomous driving.
Does that open the door to specialized foundation models going forward?
Yeah, I think the specialized foundation model is a good word to describe what we're building. And you can see that in audio processing, there are specialized audio processing foundation model. For autonomous driving, definitely one foundation model solving a lot of related problems from detection to actuation. And large language model is certainly one, probably the biggest all-inclusive model. And I think there are a lot of things happened in this tradition, in this direction. Yes.
So we had our ChatGPT moment as a society. We recently had our DeepSeek moment as a society. What is the next moment? Is it specialized large language model, specialized? What is that next moment that you see potentially coming that's going to rattle the markets, but at the same time, from an engineering standpoint, accelerate the development of these models?
If you ask me, that must be the commercialization moment.
I agree. So when do we get to that commercialization model, and what happens to the foundation models? Do they become the winners, or does the winners become what's built on top of those foundation models?
I think you probably will see a adoption rate where more and more companies are changing their existing asset or changing their existing kind of algorithmic assets into this foundation model based new paradigm of problem solving. I know that some company has already shifted. If they have not, they at least have partially shifted to this model. Of course, every company has to repay their technical debt over time. But this one, I think, is becoming a consensus. On the second hand, I would say the DeepSeek moment, where you see people are making the system more efficient, making the system smaller, and then not focusing too much on the promise of the future growth of an existing trajectory, but to go out of the box and to explore other opportunities from an engineering perspective, not a scientific perspective. I think this is happening. Some people are going slower than the others. I think the ones like us, we have very little technical debt and very little actual number of cards for us to waste. We are the ones who are in this position that we have to innovate or we die.
You have to innovate. You have to keep building a company. You're very small. I believe now you're under 50 employees according to LinkedIn data, and you do have 2 trucks, but the truck works phenomenally. And we're starting to see this trend around open source LLMs. What impact is that going to have?
For the open source, is actually less relevant in autonomous driving, more relevant in large language models. Why? Because large language model is, I would call them like one network, but within the network, there's a lot of tricks that are interchangeable. But for autonomous driving, the components that are not interchangeable, for example, the sensor choice, the how do you choose your sensor suite, your actuation component, and are you doing cars and trucks? All of these different applications are actually making the component swapping much harder. That's my opinion. It's very hard for us. For example, if Waymo open source their code base tomorrow, hypothetically, I think maybe we can have some inspirations, but can we just take their code and make it used on our system? Probably not. Just like open sourcing, I think Microsoft has open sourced certain early versions of Windows, right? And from today's perspective, can we just use this open source system to build your own system or to improve Linux? Very unlikely. It's the same thing.
What if they offered support along with it, or did some sort of half open, half closed model? We've seen some different licensing around that. There's an MIT license that some of it's closed, some of it's open. What if they did something like that and offered support along with it?
I would say that the porting cost is probably very high, if not higher than redeveloping everything. So I would say that in a autonomous driving domain, it's probably more like, yeah, we're looking at your open source stuff. We got the inspiration, but thank you, we're going to implement it our way. That's probably the most likely scenario that I have seen, in fact.
Because I look at the market for autonomous driving, both on the truck side and the passenger side, is consolidating. On the passenger side, Waymo clearly has won the market today. Tesla's its closest competitor, and if I'm in Amazon shoes, they've got over $3 billion invested in Anthropic Claude. They have Zoox that cannot find its own way to get to commercialization. If they shut down Zoox, they have all those foundation models, the autonomous driving stack. Is there any way that they can monetize that by licensing that stack or open sourcing that with support? Or at the end of the day, does that stack have to go away because it was just built for the toaster oven?
I think the value of open sourcing Zook's entire stack, my personal bet is it's rather low. But on the other hand, the success of DeepSeek actually gave the Amazon maybe another way of thinking. I actually don't know how good or how bad Zook's system is now because I have zero knowledge about it. But I think because of the DeepSeek wake-up call, especially for those who are not really leading the leaderboard with a lot of resources, I think the best answer for them is really thinking about changing the paradigm, changing maybe from the resource-centric, pouring more resource to get a promised result, to another way, which is scrappiness-centric, where they need to think out of the box. They need to know what they really want in the end. They wanted to convince it to the entire team, not really the top level, but also the mid-level managers, because all of the decision makings on a day-to-day basis are happening in the mid-level. Tell them so that if everyone is working on the same scrappiness-centric dogma of doing things, I think they probably can build a new product much quicker and with a much lower cost than many of the early competitors who have already dumped in billions of dollars in it.
You need to have scrappiness. You and the team at Bot have scrappiness with Alex Kendall and Wave are building. They have scrappiness because there's too much bloat inside of Amazon Zoox. I'm sorry. I don't see when you get to commercialization, you have a really great CFO in Paul Lamb. That gentleman could break it down to you. you have to have a clear path to profitability, scalability, and be able to increase the speed of flash closure engines. The way Zook's currently operated, it doesn't happen. So if you look at having to accelerate scrappiness or do things on a smaller budget, could Meta's Llama model or Anthropic's Claude be used to accelerate any part of the autonomous driving stack?
Directly, there's no way for them to accelerate autonomous driving because, as I said, it's just such a different thing.
No, nothing can be done. No advantages gained. Nothing gained.
Nothing gained. I would say that the most direct way of gaining, which is quite counterintuitive, is on the cultural side.
Listen, brands sell.
I know it sounds like most indirect, right? But I tell you that if you're hoping, like if anyone is hoping to just port some code and getting things done, they're on the wrong path. Again, I'm talking about scrappiness-centric dogma versus resource-centric dogma. It's really, I'm talking about the dogma. And what the dogma commands is really the day-to-day decision making. And why am I focusing too much on the day-to-day decision making? Not really one big monolithic development of one silver bullet, is because, as I said again, this is an engineering problem. And for every engineering problem, it's a large set of small problems. And a CEO or CTO will never be able to solve 200 problems, right? 200 mini decisions that are made during the process or during the execution of the project. Now, these decisions are actually made by the tech leads, by the directors. And sometimes it's invisible to you, right? And in many situations, like if you look at the many innovations by DeepSeek, like I was joking to my friend about DeepSeek's, like I can smell a lot of lack of GPU mentality in many of their thoughts. Like many of the development that they do, it makes precision for their computing and the super sparse mixture of experts. All of these things are. I read their tech report with a smile. Say, look, everyone is on the same line that they don't have the GPUs. They have to innovate. That's that's what I'm saying about their culture. The culture is like the whole organization is optimizing GPU usage, reducing the resource demand as a central dogma for everyone in the company. So no wonder that they can build this very efficient model.
Here's the question. You brought up a good point around engineers. And for the record, I think engineers are awesome. They make the world go round. They build the world. If you look at autonomous driving companies, I'm going to highlight a few here. And I want you to tell me the common denominator here because I know you're going to know it, but the audience might not. Waymo, Aurora, Bot, Wave, May, Tesla. Who are they all led by?
I would say that some company are led by, I don't want to name any one of them, but you can pick and choose. I think some companies are made by a very corporate-like thinking that they cannot tolerate any risk. They're extremely risk averse. But they wanted to make sure that they have steady progress. But with this way of thinking, there is a problem because if their progress is slower than a disruptor, they have a big problem. That's for some of them. And for the others, I think they're still in a R&D period. Like they were good at R&D, and they are still doing things somehow in an R&D flavor, right? And not really building a product. And I would say that I don't really want to classify Tesla as a level 4 company because clearly they're doing level 2. And if they ever started to do level 4, they're competing with their own customers.
How do you prioritize your projects of what you're going to tackle as you build Bob?
Well, everything is, our holy grail is the cost per mile metric. I talk to every engineer. Like, I'll give you one perfect example. People asking me all the time about the high definition map. It seems that to some people who doesn't really understand autonomous driving, having the high definition map, the HD map, seems to be a shame. Why? Because there are other people who are very cool. These cool dudes, they don't even need HD map so they can do their job. Why do you still need an HD map? I was a little bit shocked, like why? if you consider the superiority of the technology based on the adoption of some cool terms, you're definitely in the wrong place, right? I don't care whether my map is HD or SD or low definition either. It doesn't matter. The only thing that I care is the operating cost of my map. If my map, the operating cost of the map in the cost per miles perspective is low enough, why do I care if it's HG or LD? That's the only thing that I care. So I think in order to organize a company, you need to tell everyone inside the company, every small decision makers, large decision makers, that in 1 second you have to have your like intuitive reaction, just like a knee reflex on making decisions, and that knee reflex has to be consistent across the company. And I think again, if you go back to DeepSeek, because we're talking about DeepSeek, this is what I feel that I'm amazed. And I'm amazed by their capability in making sure that everyone in the company is focusing on saving GPU resources, saving training cost. And it echoes to me a lot because I see Bot Auto has a lot of these very similar things. People are worried about the cost here and there, and people are arguing against each other on CPM on the mid-level. So this is something that I really like. I think this, yes, we are going to have our own, I wouldn't call it DeepSeek moment, I would call it Bot Auto moment, hopefully, in the future, happening, I would say, in this year. So stay tuned.
Is that moment driver out?
Ah, what a spoiler.
See, there you go. So if you have that scrappy mentality and mindset that, let's say, the day before you started Bot Auto and you incorporated, how did you build the model?
On day one, we know that we don't have enough money to buy a lot of training data. So we started to think about how can we maximize the pre-training process so we can save some money. And in fact, we have saved a lot of money on pre-training. We use a lot of temporal data for pre-training, like we can see, can show to the video of frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and then asking the deep learning to predict the video frame number 5. Something like that, or take a piece of the mask and then ask the neural network to fill the mask and penalize if the filling is not perfect. All of these little free tricks are actually helping our system. And in fact, once in a time, we have the slogan, we call it plug and play in short, meaning that you plug the power and the model train itself with zero assistance from our human annotation, and the model should improve itself. This is very similar. I mean, again, going back to DeepSeek. I don't know why I go back to DeepSeek so often, because I see so many similarities in terms of the mentality of developing things. This is basically Bot Auto Zero. We had Bot Auto Zero last year. Actually, before last year, in 2023, I believe November, December of 23, we had that. In early 24, we also have that. So zero annotation data from human. Why? Because we don't have money and we have to do it this way. And then our foundation model is primarily trained on this pre-training process. And of course, to some extent, after you train the model and the model performs good enough, it's more beneficial to spend a small dollar on annotation data, for example, spend several thousand dollars per month for training initially, and now it goes to maybe tens of thousands of dollars per month. But this scale of spending on human annotation, I think is unimaginable, even for me. Like if you ask me to give a prediction by the beginning of Bot Auto, I couldn't even imagine that we can have this low cost operating mode. But that's the beauty of pioneering it, right?
Being a pioneer is cool. Pioneers built the West.
Yes. And we are, and again, sorry for interrupting, we are on this edge of new frontier. And if you stay here, it gives you more risks than moving forward.
And you can eliminate those risks because you've seen a lot of mistakes that have been made from other companies in the past. Is that, okay, wagon one went west. Uh-oh. Lauren, don't go here because you're going on Native American land and you don't want to end up scalped. Okay, go this route. Okay, great. We'll go to this. There's a lot of things that you've learned. When you take this approach that you're building with Bot Auto, is that approach help you save cost on GPUs and the demand that you need for GPUs?
Yes, very big time. So that's why I was so excited about the recent news of this wake up call, because I was doing a lot of this scrappiness little tricks and combine them together. I think my initial reception from the investor was very different. People are out of their good intention. They're worried about me. Xiaodi, you should have spent more money in the GPUs. You don't have this 10 million budget in GPUs. How can you win the war? But now I think some of them, they will be happier than before.
What happens when TPUs enter the picture?
Generally, I call that ASIC, ASIC. ASIC solutions, specifically for deep learning acceleration. I think yes. If you have a big enough platform, it's probably more economic to build your own TPUs or own ASIC like Amazon. If you're big enough, then you will be able to utilize your scale advantage and build your own TPUs or ASICs to save some money. But that's not something that a small company can benefit from.
But when you have access to those TPUs through a cloud environment, can that help accelerate the bot model?
We don't really look into that level. We are very pragmatic again. We only look at, okay, we want to train this model, how much this cost. It's really coming to the computing amount, the amount of computing and the converted dollars.
You said earlier, and you're right, DeepSeek is a wake-up call for autonomous driving. Looking to the future, do you see more autonomous driving companies have to get scrappier, more energy efficient, or how do you see the overall impact of DeepSeek having on the development of autonomous driving?
Oh, great question. I would say that maybe the one of the biggest mystery in autonomous driving is about mileage. I would say this is a perfect analogy to the scaling law in adopt widely in the large language models. So I'm going to explain a little bit further in here. People were thinking about, what if I don't see this scenario? What if I don't see that scenario? I need to collect more miles, right? And I need to see all of the mileage. And I need to be sure that I have not seen anything that is beyond my imagination, and then I can go forward. But the problem is that no matter how many miles you collect, you always have this little unknown part. And even worse, the more mileage you collect, the efficacy of the mileage in helping you improving your system actually degrades. Like, you probably need the 2x more mileage to see one new unseen phenomena, right? That's very similar to the scaling law. So this is I think that's why I'm saying there's an analogy in here. So why people still try to push more miles, enlarge their fleet, and also bragging about their mileage? Why? Because this gives them the sense of comfort. People would feel comfort. Look, I have accumulated 10 million miles. Even 1 billion miles. I remember, I think some company I think it's Tesla has declared that they have all of their vehicle driven for 1 billion miles. That's a large number, yes. But still, so what, right? The question is like, first of all, they did not really store this 1 billion miles of driving experience. They did not. The second is that how much have you gained from this 1 billion miles, realistically speaking? My understanding is it's questionable, because the extreme situation that I have seen is airplane landing on the highway, and other extreme cases are military tanks on the highway that we have seen in my past life experience. But the problem is that this time we may be able to see these cases, and we develop specific algorithm for handling airplane or for handling tanks. But what if tomorrow there is an elephant on the highway? And that's another different problem. So instead of seeing all of these problems and making sure that you have the comfort of seeing them and solving them, the alternative way is that we know that certain types of this will happen on the highway, and we seek for a generic solution out of it. And I think that is the way that I'm thinking, that I'm looking forward, because no matter how many miles do you collect, if you're relying on a specific, like a case-by-case type of solution, you always run into a problem that you don't have enough mileage. But on the other hand, if you start by knowing that you won't be able to enumerate all of the possible scenarios, today is elephant, tomorrow is giraffe, right? You can never enumerate everything. So the generic solution will be rather simple. What I foresee is, like, thinking about this, I'm oversimplifying this problem. Having the LiDAR beams, if you have a blob of LiDAR and you cannot explain what is that is the obstacle. So we have a generic obstacle avoidance or an obstacle detection algorithm, and that will basically solve all of the unknown situations.
I'll summarize it this way, Xiaodi. Perhaps there's a new way forward. DeepSeek might have just unlocked a new way forward the bot is implementing. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is scrappy engineering. Xiaodi, thank you so much for once again coming on the road to autonomy, and especially thank you today for coming on and sharing your deep knowledge into AI and DeepSeek. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grayson. Glad to be here.